groove going on, guys? Welcome back to another Va2A News Update. Today we are going live once again, so if you're over on YouTube right now, check us out, say hello. Make that nice little sound happen just for you. Today we got a couple things going on. Headlines, once again, from the Epoch Times. We're going to be talking about Netflix's interesting new movie, Cuties. Check that out. We're also going to have a report from what's been going on in the Virginia House of Delegates, as well as the Virginia Senate. A couple things that are interesting there. We've got House Bill 509 was introduced, 5099, which is a no-knock search warrant. You're going to want to hear about that. Continuing on, our main story is going to be about Keese. If you don't know about him, well, now you will. And finally, we're going to follow that with all of this talk about defunding the police. What would that actually look like in Virginia if they defunded the police? What would happen? So those questions are coming around now. Stick around. Let's jump right into it. Guys, once again, don't forget, if you enjoy what we're doing here, you can support us pretty easily just by hitting that Amazon link below. The Amazon link, no matter what you purchase, we'll go ahead and send a couple schmeckles this way, help us create more content. The link that you're going to find is to a Blink home security system, the same home security system that I use and I enjoy. I bought it with my own money. I have not been paid to say anything about it, but I thought if I'm going to give you a link, why not give you a link to something that I enjoy? So there you go. There's our 1-minute pro tip. Use it wisely. Starting off today, right over here, of course, we've got our Epoch Times. Epoch Times. I like the Epoch Times, guys. Today, we're actually going to start off with 200 people being charged with federal crimes under the Operation Legend probe. Now, if you're watching, if you're listening online over at anchor.fm/VA2A News, don't forget to check us out there and ask some questions. You can leave a little message for us, and we'll include that in our next broadcast. But you see just a picture, nighttime photo of a couple cops standing by a police car. Looks like a Ford of some sort. And it's just a street shot. Really nice shot right there. And it says, Chicago police officers stand in front of Rhodes Funeral Services as they investigate a shooting on July 21st, 2020. Now, if you guys aren't familiar with Operation Legend is actually named after a legend, a young kid that was killed, a young black kid that was killed a couple months ago during the riots, the Black Lives Matter riots or riots over George Floyd. And Operation was named after him, Legend, in respect of his name. And one of the things that it aims to do is to go into big cities and begin breaking up these peaceful rioters that turn into protests, or these peaceful protests, I should say, that turn into riots. And you guys all know what we're talking about. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about that today, but continuing on, just to give you an example, over 200 charged with federal crimes under Operation Legend. This is the front page of the Epoch Times. Operation Legend was launched in early July as part of efforts to reduce violent crime across the country. By Janta Khan, it says more than 200 people have been charged with federal crimes among nearly 1,500 people arrested as part of an initiative aimed to stem violent crime in major inner cities, the Justice Department stated on August 19th. This is Bill Barr's Justice Department, Attorney General Bill Barr, and he's been really heading this up pretty hard. And you'll remember that several times the federal police, or not police, but the federal authorities have been asked to leave different areas, specifically Seattle, and it took a long time before Lori Lightfoot, the mayor of Chicago, asked to have federal troops, or not troops, but federal authorities come in and help with all of the just crime and things that are going on down there as a result of the death of George Floyd. So lots of stuff's going on. Continue on and just says that the figures represent the latest numbers as law enforcement operations taken since the Operation Legend started, or in early July, which was since been explained as numerous cities around the country, Attorney General Barr said. So he's just talking about the fact that there's been a lot of crime going on. And I want to kind of follow that up here. This is important because if you don't recall, we're going to look at Mr. Keese here in just a minute. But this headline right here, Operation Legend, is already cracking down, and 200 are charged with federal crimes. Lots of times, these people that are brought in on charges are actually let go by the local state authority or the city prosecutor. And the reason that that's important is because they are able to riot, create crimes, hurt, maim, destroy property and things like that, and they're never charged with it. Or if they're charged with it, there's no consequence because the charges are dropped. And a lot of these big-name organizations go around and provide bail and things like that for these people, knowing that they're going to be able to get out of the charge just because the local prosecutors and things refuse to prosecute. The federal crimes are different, though, because federal crimes are not processed on within the state. They're processed at the federal level, which means that, well, Attorney General Bill Barr is not dropping these charges. He's prosecuting them. So it's another way that the federal government can step in and kind of rein in loose cities, mainly Democrat cities, that don't want anybody messing with their protesters. And I'm using air quotes if you're watching there. But we're going to continue on. I got a couple of other little stories I just want to talk about here. Here's something interesting. A lot of things that are going on, and I'm actually on page 4 of Nation on the 20th edition, Thursday, the 20th edition of the Epoch Times, and it says Texas governor proposes freezing property taxes to cities that vote to defund the police. And this is going to talk a little bit about what our main story is on as we get to that a little bit later in the broadcast. But defunding the police, this is a very strange concept. And what does that actually mean? Does it mean getting rid of the police force? And if so, what happens and who jumps into their stead later on? Is it the sheriff? Is it a different body? What is defunding the police? A lot of the things that people that are asking or calling for defunding the police talk about local and community policing and things along those lines. Well, one way around that, the Texas governor is saying that any city that wants to defund the police that votes to and actually does it, the Texas governor is proposing that their property tax monies be frozen. So their property taxes can't increase, property tax being a way that the cities and localities make money. So it won't be able to increase at all, which is important because the city will not be able to gain that money that from that property as revenues and then continue to build and upgrade their infrastructure, which thereby upgrades the city. Now, this is kind of a two-edged sword, but the thinking of the Texas governor is quite simply that if the city is going to be so loose with their protection of the citizens as to not provide just basic policing services, that they don't deserve any of that cash. So I thought that was a really interesting read right there. Those that are listening, there is a really interesting photo right here. It says, people hold up signs outside Austin Police Department after a vigil for Garrett Foster in downtown Austin, Texas on July 26, 2020. And there are hundreds of people in this. It's a nighttime photo, and they're holding up signs. It appears to be mainly females that I see in this photo. It's hard to see the people in the background, but it is pretty sharp. And they're holding signs that say Black Lives Matter, I can't breathe, things along those lines. So if that wasn't interesting enough, let's just jump over here to Netflix. If you haven't heard about this great movie, and I'm saying that sarcastically with little air quotes. If you haven't heard about Netflix, Netflix has come out with a movie called Cuties, Cuties. And I've got a website, just Google pulled up, and I've got a search going on that just says Cuties Netflix, and I'm searching by news, and about 1.6 million finds pop up. And right off the top, Netflix apologizes for inappropriate Cuties poster that was criticized for sexualizing children. Just think about that for a second, okay? For those of you that have not seen it, I'm going to show you some images here, but they're all on Google. They're all safe for work and things like that. But the concept about Cuties was that Netflix, as I understand it, received or got the rights to produce a video or publish a video here in the United States that had already been made by a French producer. I think that the lady has French citizenship, but is also a Muslim, and it really is about sexualizing young children. It's about a clique of young children that find their voice through twerking and create a dance club. It's called Cuties in the United States. It has a different name, a French name. If this sounds crazy, as if 2020 couldn't send us anything else strange, well, it is, and it is. So just keep that in mind. I'm going to just click right over here on Deadline, just up at the top. I'm going to read you the article. Actually, it's going to hit me up with, let's go to the Los Angeles Times. Netflix apologizes after thousands call to remove film that sexualizes young girls. Now, the image that you're going to see right here are of 4 young girls just in a row. It's kind of a portrait-style image emphasizing the first young lady that's there. They're all around 11, 10, 11, 12. This image is an image like you might take. There's nothing strange or odd about this particular image. This is the image that Netflix has replaced with the image that was the problem. So here we can see a perfectly good, fine image that doesn't change the content of the movie, but at least it changes what's on the cover. And it just says right here, I'm going to begin reading from the Los Angeles Times by Christy Keese, staff writer, August 20th, 2020. Netflix issued an apology Thursday after thousands signed a petition demanding immediate removal of the controversial French film Cuties from the streaming platform. The movie about an 11-year-old who rebels against her family and joins a free-spirited dance crew, which that was also changed, by the way. This is an update, but that was changed. The original description said joins a twerking dance crew. Think about that. The 11-year-old who rebels against her family and joins a free-spirited dance crew, that's the update, is accused in the online campaign of sexualizing young girls for the viewing pleasure of, well, the P word. Originally titled Meninones, the project premiered earlier this year at the Sundance Film Festival, to where it won a jury award for directing. All right, so I probably butchered the title that was supposed to be in French, so please excuse me there. But yeah, Hollywood Film Festival, Sundance, all that stuff. We know what's going on with the updated Pizzagate, so to speak. Chrissy Teigen and the likes, the Epsteins, the special log that's going on. Of course, this is a very strange thing. Now, it's strange because why are you going to have little 11-year-olds dancing funky? Now, you might say, Rob, you're acting a little strange. Why does it even matter? Well, let's actually look. Right now, I'm actually pulling up the original poster. And you can see it right here. We're going to go back to Deadline. Let's see if we can just get the image up for us. Okay. And let's just pull that image up. Open link in a new tab. Nope. Open image in a new tab. So the original image actually, and this is a cropped image. It doesn't show quite as much. But what it does do is show that there's young girls that are kind of in this twerking pose, one of them out here. And like I said, this image is actually cropped quite a bit smaller. Let's see if we can find another one of the original right there. Yeah, you can see it quite a bit better here on the side. You see the four girls. One girl's down on her knees. She's got her bottom to her heels, and she's got her hands on her hips, pressing them outwards, her knees outwards. Another girl in the background is standing in the A-frame power pose. The girl just slightly in front of her is actually on her knees, toes on the ground, knees on the ground, one hand on the ground, one hand on her butt. You get what I'm saying here. At what point in time would this be considered normal? Well, it's not, and even though 2020 has thrown us some crazy curveballs, guys, that's just not it. So those are your headlines today. We're having a lot of fun going on over here talking about this stuff. Headlines in the news. Let's go ahead and get ready to move on to what's happening in Virginia. Guys, once again, don't forget, if you like what we're doing here, go ahead and hit any of the Amazon links down below. That helps us just continue to create really great content simply by shopping on Amazon. Doesn't matter what you pick up. Click that link first. It'll send a couple of dollars our way. Thank you there. So, a couple things. We're going to jump right into what happened today in the special session of the 20th, right? Okay, Thursday the 20th. A lot was actually going on, and then not a lot. In the House of Delegates, one important thing that took place that I saw, and I watched a couple of hours of it, was that Delegate Gilbert, he's the minority leader for the Republicans. Democrats have the control of the House. And he stepped up and was talking about how people are supposed to be guaranteed that if you're logging on to your House of Delegates meetings electronically, how can you be assured that the person that's actually there, that's voting, speaking, or whatever, is actually the person that was voted into office? It was a really great question. The reason came up because ever since they've gone into this special session and they have had these electronic meetings, Well, yesterday there was actually a rule change about these electronic meetings. That was a last-minute rule change that was voted on and passed in the House rules, which is a right of the House. The House can make their own rules. But it had been previously agreed upon that the members of the House, would actually be there in the state buildings or VCU to conduct their business in person. But a last-minute change was made yesterday and approved a change to the rules. I think it was Rule 518 or something like that. Please don't quote me. I don't recall. But maybe it was 5,000. Maybe it was House Bill 5018, an amendment to the rule change. I don't recall exactly. But it's that rule change that allows them to meet without being in person. Well, the problem with that is they're setting it up on Zoom meetings on iPads, okay? That may sound great to you or whomever else, but the reality is, wasn't there a gigantic security breach? Didn't a Chinese company breach Zoom somehow? I mean, just think about that. So the worst part about this was that several people that were on the meetings did not have their cameras on or didn't even have their names entered, and they were voting on Commonwealth business. Well, the whole purpose of meeting in person is to make sure that the people are represented by the person that they voted for. Eileen Fillicorn responded to Mr. Gilbert just by saying that she expects people to be full of integrity and do the right thing, and she hopes that they'll have their cameras turned on and fill out their names properly. But she expects the people that are on the Zoom meetings, which are sent out through a confidential link, right, just to anyone, but can be forwarded to anybody from that link. The link is not secure. It's only as secure as you not sending it to someone else. Oh, man, geez. Guys, think about that right there. Does it not blow your mind a little bit? Think about that. If that wasn't enough, we did have something interesting that they voted on today, or introduced, I should say, and that is actually House Bill 5099, search warrants prohibition on no-knock search warrants. Now, check this out. I was reading onto this. This could actually be something interesting. LaCherice D. Arid introduced this bill, and this bill prohibits any law enforcement officer, excuse me. This bill prohibits any law enforcement officer from seeking, executing, or participating in the execution of a no-knock search warrant, defined in the bill as any search warrant executed without law enforcement officers giving notice of their identity, authority, and purpose prior to entering the place to be searched. The bill requires law enforcement officer to provide notice of his identity, authority, and the purpose prior to entering the place to be searched, and states that prior to undertaking any search or seizure pursuant to the search warrant, the executing officer shall read and give a copy of the search warrant to the person to be searched, or the owner of the place to be searched, or if the owner is not present, to any occupant of the place to be searched. If the place to be searched is unoccupied, the executing law enforcement officer shall leave a copy of the search warrant suitably affixed to the place which was searched. Well, that's really interesting. And without knowing any more about this, I saw this today just as we were, or I was preparing this for you. This is a pretty lengthy bill, and I kind of like the where it's going. It seems like it's may have some counter to some of the extreme risk protection orders that are out there. I don't know if any of you guys have any information about this or want to send me some tips. You can send that to 1776 at va2a.news. I'd love to hear it, or anybody that knows a little bit more about this. I will continue to research that as we go through. Pretty interesting stuff. Now, we're getting ready to go on to another thing, so let's just take a real quick break. I'm going to get something to drink real quick just to wet my throat. And now we're going to talk a little bit more about Keese and about Operation Legend. So coming up in just a moment. Friends, I am back, and just want to remind you, too, if you like what we're doing, don't forget, I said it twice now, this will be the third time, go ahead and hit up those Amazon links. They are very helpful and helping me produce this content for you. I'm trying to come to you guys with a little bit more live content after being canceled over on YouTube for a little while. The channel just got back up and running, and monetization is happening, but not exactly. So shopping through those links is very, very helpful. All right, as we come right back to the story, let's talk about Keese, Marquise Love. Marquise Love, right here, you can see I've got a happy little Google page up, and my search term is Keese Love asking for money. But who is Keese Love? Let me tell you a little bit of the history of this right quick. Just the other day, a Portland protester actually was involved with kicking a man in the head while he was already down on the ground after he had been beaten. Keese Love is a biracial individual, was kicking who he said was a Nazi. We're going to read about that. He was just defending himself from a racist. And an interesting part of that story is that it is completely made up. The man that was kicked in the head and out for the count for quite some time, feared to be dead while he was on the ground and brutally beaten, had actually been protecting a transgender woman. I believe it was a man that transitioned to woman at a Portland protest where he happened to be driving by, saw the woman being beaten, robbed, things taken, slammed, pressed on the ground, all kinds of stuff, for which she was fighting back, but was being harmed more so than any good was doing. So he stopped his truck, got out to go help her. He didn't get out to go fight. That could be a good thing or a bad thing. He got out to break up a fight and was thereby harassed, beaten, and dropped, then kicked in the head. There's a lot of context to take in here, but that's what happened. I'm actually going to provide the entire video for you to see that in just a moment, so you don't have to take my word for it. The reason this is important is, don't forget, Mr. Barr over here is talking about Operation Legend, okay? And when we talk about Operation Legend, these are the people that Operation Legend is getting off the street. These are the types of people, the 200 charged with federal crimes after a 1,500 people arrest. These are the type of people that Operation Legend is here to help us protect ourselves from. So let's go ahead and look at this. We're actually over here on heavy.com news. I don't generally find heavy, but I like the fact that they had the entire story and a good link to it. So Keese Love accused of kicking Portland man in the head at protest. Keese Love is accused of being the suspect who kicked a man in the head during a Black Lives Matter protest in Oregon, Portland, Oregon, a scene that was captured in a graphic video. Portland police released his name in a photo on August 18th, writing, "Yesterday, the Police Bureau of Portland began investigating the assault that occurred in downtown area where an adult male associated to a white pickup truck was violently assaulted. Investigators identified the suspect as 25-year-old Keese Love. Investigators made attempts to contact Love, but could not locate him." Interestingly enough, Love is a fired or former security officer at an establishment of some sort. I don't know where that was, so I won't speculate. But he worked in security. He's got a pretty long rap sheet, apparently, from reports that are out there that the Portland Police Bureau put out, and has been seen at Black Lives Matter protests providing security, wearing the security vest and bag, just like a plate carrier and such. Here we can see him in a picture right there. This is Keese Love. And at least 2 other people were physically assaulted in a series of videos that have gone viral on social media. The confusing set of circumstances involving the victim crashing his truck after a woman in the vehicle was attacked. You can also watch other vehicles later on in the article. They're just talking about what we talked about. The actual encounter to get to the point where the man was on the ground and kicked in the head took quite a bit of time. And we're actually going to see that in just a moment. But what I'd like to do is play for you quickly just a small part of what happened. We should be right here. Remember, I've got a 30-minute video that I'm going to send you a link to. I'll show you where it is here in just a moment, and I'll send you that link so that you can watch it to yourself, for yourself. We're just showing you one small moment of that video. Let's listen to it now. Okay, there you go. Well, if you didn't see that, this is the man right here who was just kicked in the head. This is Keese Love. As we see, prior to being kicked in the head, the man is on the ground. He's already sitting. He's been beaten. Okay, he's been yanked out. Well, he wasn't yanked out of the truck. The woman that he was with, which was not the trans woman, was pulled out of the truck after he tried to leave a particular area where protesters, actually rioters, stood in front of his truck and barred his exit. At one point in time, he tried to speed off, somehow hit a pole or hit something that kept him from going. The truck was then stopped, and then a crowd surrounded him. Think about that. How would you feel? You are surrounded by a crowd of people that are threatening to kick your butt if you don't get out of the truck, and you know they will if you do. They got the woman that was traveling with him out of the truck, And then he got out of the truck in an effort apparently to defend the woman that was in the truck, not the same woman, not the trans woman that he was defending before. In any event, turns out to be a bad situation. It gets worse after he's already been beaten. He's been beaten. You can see he's got blood on the left side of his face coming from his head. He's actually sitting there in a bit of a daze. And then, out of the blue, watch. Okay, boom. You see that. Okay, if you didn't see that, let's pull it back a second. This is Keese Love right here. I'm pointing to Keese Love. If you're listening on a podcast, just note that we've got a downtown street. There's about 12 people in the scene that we can see. The man is in the front of the video that's getting ready to be assaulted, kicked in the head. He's sitting up. Apparently, he might be messing with his phone or doing something we can't see. He's in the bottom center of the screen, and then from the back, as the camera pans just slightly out of view, attempting to not get this particular beating, this particular kick on the screen, we see a figure running up behind him. Okay, go ahead and play. Boom. Now, if you notice that, he got kicked, slam right up underneath the chin. And look at this extremely angry face. The guy was sitting down on the ground, and then Keese Love over here is some kind of angry. Now, it's an interesting note. We know that Keese Love is the person because people on 4chan started searching, put their internet intelligence to the test, and started finding social media accounts of this guy and helped the Portland police find this person. Listen to what's being said now.
You fucking loser! Fucking trying to run people over!
So this goes on for a little bit. I'm actually going to close this window down. Listen to what they're saying. F that effing racist trying to run people over. In the background, if you play this down, you'll hear people saying, kill all of them. Kill, kill. We've got a problem, guys. That's happening right now. Now, that's in Portland, okay? Let's just go one more step further. A couple days since, of course, this happened on the 18th. And here we have a picture. Keese Love. This was just a little bit ago. I believe it was yesterday. And look at him. He looks almost like he's crying. He's on the run from police. He's been on the run. And he says he's got this information that he puts out. Daddy Keese. This is over on Snapchat. He says, might go to jail for murder tonight for a racist when all I did was fight him. Look it up on Twitter. Put money on my books and come see me. All I did was fight him. Interesting thoughts. Guys, if you want to see a little bit more, you're welcome to head over here. We're on Twitter right now, and you can actually come at From Kalen, at From, F-R-O-M-K-A-L-E-N, and it's Kalen from Scribber. Scribber News Network is who he defines himself as, and he's got a 32-minute video that shows the entire thing that took place. In this video right now, if you're looking at it, I've stopped at about 6 minutes forwards. And what you'll notice, you can't see, but the center of the video, about 20 feet from the camera, there's a person in a white shirt, blue shorts, looks like some kind of Doc Martens work boots, and a red scarf. That is the trans person that the man who was just kicked in the head that you saw was attempting to help after she's already assaulted by a group of people which are getting ready to flock her. No need to show all of this. Now you know where to find it. Don't forget, go to twitter.com/from, F-R-O-M, Kalen, K-A-L-E-N. You should be able to find it pretty easily. It was posted August 19th, 2020 at 8:47 a.m., so check out that. Guys, that's going to give us just a second as we transition to our next part. Let's go ahead and move on over and talk about what it means to defund the police. This is a conversation I've been having with my sweetheart a little bit and a few other of my friends. I want to toss out some thoughts to you guys and get some community feedback. So let's pick it up with the role of Virginia sheriffs and police, well, in Virginia. Guys, I really enjoy hanging out with you over here like this. This is really nice. I hope you're having a good time, too. As you see real quick, I just want to kind of talk to you about the defund movement. The defund movement has actually caused quite a bit of shock. Originally, when Defund the Police came out, most people were thinking, this is ridiculous. Nothing happened. But then liberal leftist cities started doing exactly that, defunding the police. Okay, one of the most paramount or capital types of issues of this taking place was actually Carmen Best, the chief of the police. The chief of the police that just resigned, basically from Seattle, Washington, in the aftermath of all of the defund the police movement, which has been going on. If you didn't know that this movement is having an effect and that police departments are being defunded, then you got to kind of open your eyes a little bit and just look around, because that's happening right now. The reason that Keese, people like Keese love, can do what they're doing is because there is a lack of police involvement. Now, how can that be? Well, it happens a couple of ways, and let's first make ourselves known one important thing. The police are not beholden to the people. The police are beholden to the incorporation for which they serve, and that incorporation is usually a city. Could be a town, but it's not generally the county. The police in Virginia actually usurp the power, the constitutional power of one of the 5 constitutional officers in Virginia. The sheriff is the high constable. And the incorporation of a city or the incorporation of a locality creating a police department actually usurps the sheriff's authority. And we're going to look at that. So let's actually look over that just a little bit. We've got a couple of things that are going to help us out here. Let's duties and powers of the police force from Virginia law, as well as the authority of and immunity of sheriffs and deputies. So before we get into that, I've been reading up about this quite a bit for the past few days, and I want to share with you some things. If you have ever wondered to yourself, why is it that sheriffs do more in some localities, generally counties, than they do in others? Meaning, if that sheriffs actually enforce different kinds of law and speeding violations, things like that, but actually do the job of what you would generally consider police. It's because in Virginia, when you have a group of people that come together as a locality, they have several types of government that they can form, and those types of governments require specific things to happen. First, they have to be organized in a certain way. Now, most of that took place with land way back in the day, and there's not a lot of free land left in Virginia for localities to incorporate, for localities to choose a form of government, one of the options that Virginia has. And we'll talk about that, but that's under Title 15.2, counties, cities, and towns. However, when a locality does, where does it get that land? When does a group of people, where do they get that land from? Well, the oldest land that we have here is the land of the state. The Commonwealth owns it. And then the Commonwealth has counties or precincts or areas within that land which are allowed to be governed by people that have organized themselves into those localities, generally counties. At that point in time, the county would choose a type of governorship, whether it be like a board of supervisors or a manager form or whatever. And in order to do so, it would require that the county elect 5 different officers. I'm going to see if I can remember them all at one time. A collector of the tax, a collector of a revenue, a clerk, some form of magistrate, a sheriff, and I can't remember the 5th one. There's another one there, a 5th constitutional officer that is required for locality to be seen and given a seal and accepted into the House of Delegates, and accepted as a locality, a recognized locality. None of that is happening anymore. That's historical stuff. I suppose that it could happen. I mean, it happened in the 60s when Virginia Beach City became Virginia Beach City from Princess Anne County, but these things don't happen as often as they would back then. That's important because having an elected sheriff, when you're a county and you haven't chosen a different incorporated entity to be, means that the sheriff is the highest constitutionally elected law officer of the land. And so 15.2, 1730.1, Authority and Immunity of Sheriffs of the Virginia Code, it says that in counties where no police department has been established and the sheriff is the chief law enforcement officer, the sheriff may enter an agreements with any other governmental entity providing law enforcement services in the Commonwealth, and may furnish and receive interjurisdictional law enforcement assistance on all law enforcement purposes, including those described in this chapter, and for additional purposes described in another chapter. Sheriffs and the deputies providing or receiving different assistances shall have the authority, benefits, immunity from liability, and exemptions from laws and ordinances and regulations as officers acting within their own jurisdictions. A sheriff has jurisdiction and has authority throughout the land of Virginia, not just one place. But notice here that it's talking very specifically about in the absence of a police department. This particular statement of authority of the sheriffs assumes that there will be a police department. Well, let's find out about police. Powers and duties of the police force. This is 15.2-1704. The police force, and there's several parts, we're just going to read a couple of them. The police force of a locality, just like we were talking before, a locality, an organization of people that is recognized by the General Assembly. The police force of a locality is hereby invested with all the power and authority which formerly belonged to the office of the constable at common law and is responsible for the prevention and detention of crime, the apprehension of criminals and the safeguard of life, property, the preservation of peace, and the enforcement of state and local laws, regulations, and ordinances. This is interesting. It's interesting because it discusses what the police officer does, what the police officer's role is, but it says that they are vested with all of the power formerly belonging to the constable, the sheriff. And it's specifically talking about the locality, not just the area as a whole. It's just in that locality, specifically to the locality and later on to the board for which they serve, the mayor, the board of supervisors. A police officer has no authority in civil matters except to serve as a temporary detention and such like that, or to serve as a protection order, or to execute all warrants or summonses that may be placed in his hands by a magistrate. A town police officer, after receiving training and supervision of 8, that's not too much important. That's some other things. So here's what we've got. We've got this concept of defunding the police, right? And I think this is where people don't recognize, and this is where some of my conversation is going to begin. So we've got a little bit of that. We'll probably spend a whole episode to go into this a little bit further, especially depending on the kind of traction that we get. But defund the police. What are the tenets? What does the group defund the police want? What does that mean? Well, generally it means that they want to abolish patrolling. Right, they want to get rid of the concept of policing that is patrolling. This has quite a bit to do with profiling. They want to bring policing into an area where people recognize and have some kind of a kinship or association with that. It's also called community policing. They want to put the revenue, the monetary thing that we're talking about here, I've lost my words for a second, the funding for that police department in the hands of the people. And finally, they want to have direct accountability. Well, that's actually what you've got when you've got a sheriff. You defund the police, and in Virginia, there's a referendum to abolish the police force. We'll look at that at another time. But if you do abolish the police, if you do defund the police and to get rid of the police, which is not what's happening everywhere, but what the movement means, what then happens? Well, you don't actually have a vacuum of power. You have a constitutional officer that already fills that position, known as the sheriff. Now, different localities will all have different laws. We're just talking specifically about Virginia, and I am in no way learned on the subject. I'm just sharing with you what I've read and what you can read, so you can go find it yourself. That's why I'm asking and engaging in conversation with you guys. But when you do such a thing, if you were to defund the police, what would that look like? Well, it would look like, in the case of policing, if you've got a problem with Officer Jones has no responsibility or duty for your own personal protection or safety. He works as an agent of the incorporated entity, which is the town or the city. He works for them, and he does what the chief says. Well, the chief is not beholden to you, the person, or we, the people. Neither is the officer. That's an interesting thing. If you were to defund the police, the constitutional process that would step up and fill that void immediately because their authority would be restored to them would be the sheriff. The sheriff is someone who is beholden to the people because they are a constitutionally elected body. The deputies that they deputize, requiring an amount of training as set forth in the Code of Virginia, all are beholden to the people. In fact, it's commonplace that when a sheriff comes in, the deputies, sometimes they get a little dicey. They don't know if they're going to keep their position. New sheriff comes in, whole new command structure and things like that. Well, that would mean that the sheriff would then be beholden, which would mean they're directly accountable to the people, which means that if you dislike the sheriff, you can change the person through a vote, which means that you can have your community policing because you can have a person that you're familiar with in the different precincts. Now, you might say, Rob, there's a lot of police officers and there's so many different precincts. Well, yes, you could have one sheriff, and in each of those police precincts, you could have a chief deputy that is also responsible, beholden to the sheriff, just like the sheriff is to the people. So the sheriff has the ability to have multiple chief deputies in different areas in order to maintain law and order, and the sheriff is directly responsible as the constable of the law to the people. Well, Rob, you might say, well, this doesn't sound too great. I mean, it's kind of great, but what about the money? Police departments and everything, they eat up lots of money. First of all, I'm not for getting rid of the police by any means. Okay, I'm a very big blue supporter. I got police officers in my family. I don't think all police are great, but I don't think all people are great. I think most police officers are doing an excellent job, and that some of them are jerks. Now, police reform, I completely agree with it. And this is where the money comes in. You want to reform the police department? You want to get some of those jerks out of there? Yes, they are there. They're there. There are people that should not be police officers there, but they are not the majority. They are the minority. And hopefully through what's going on right now, there is quite a bit of reform that's taking place with policing through these peaceful protests. That does not mean that's what's happening with these violent riots is part of the peaceful process. Civil disobedience in order to get your message across does not include kicking people in the head and then asking for money on Twitter or Snapchat. Okay, that's not the case. But if it were, and the police were defunded, and the sheriff took over that spot and refilled the void that the police usurped from the sheriff, then yes, you could very easily change whatever departmental policy that you wanted, whatever departmental policy that you were concerned with through voting and through referendums. That would happen, could be as early as yearly. For those different types of referendums, you'd have common ground to speak with the mayor or the board of supervisors, be able to speak with the sheriff directly, and the sheriff would have to listen to you, because if not, if they didn't go with the will of the people, then you just vote a new one in next time. And speaking of budgets, you wouldn't get to use the budget for the sheriff for anything other than what you wanted to, and the people would get to set the budget because they could go to the town meetings about budgeting and all the different things and participate in the political process. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's going on there. So I guess the final thing to say is, where do you stand? We've talked about a lot of stuff. You're thinking about defunding the police, I think actually means something different to those after you hear this. You hear defunding the police, don't turn your ears off next time. Listen to what's actually being said and kind of jump into that conversation. Not that we want to defund the police, but if we did defund the police, that wouldn't mean policing is gone. It would mean that the body of the sheriff would take over their rightful position. And actually, I think that's pretty interesting. One final note on the difference between sheriffs and police. Once again, if we look at the police officer is required is responsible for the prevention and detention of crime, or detection of crime, the apprehension of criminals, the safeguard of life and property, and the preservation of peace and the enforcement of state and local laws, regulations, and ordinances. A sheriff doesn't have to do that. You can't fire the sheriff. You can fire a police officer. You can fire a police chief. They are hireable. They are expendable, truly. You can't just fire a sheriff, and you can't just fire a deputy. The sheriff can, but you can't, which means that when they enact the law, when they take a choice and a stance to not enforce Senate Bill or House Bill 961 or whatever of these other things, the police officers have a requirement to follow the law because their authority requires that they do, as opposed to as 15.2-1704, powers and duties of the police force. They are required. They have no discretion as far as that's concerned. They have to enforce state and local laws, regulations, and ordinances. They must. Sheriffs don't. Sheriffs can choose. And that particular part of the entire process right here, the authority, allows the sheriff to correct for a far-reaching legislator or government. Remember, there's always checks and powers everywhere you go, and checks and balances everywhere you go. And when we usurp the power and the authority of the sheriff and we're placing to them a subservient that is actually beholden to the powers, then we actually move some of the power from the hands of the people and place it into the government. There's nothing wrong with policing, but if you wanted to know why, the cops can arrest you in the city, but the sheriff takes you to jail in the county, this is it. But those are just my thoughts, and I'm not saying that they're the end-all, be-all. Tell me a little bit about what you think. Let me know how you feel about that. Guys, it has been a great time today, a really great time today. We're talking about lots of things. I want to thank you for watching and remind you to hit those links down below. Don't forget to go on over there and support the channel just by buying your next, Keurig cup pod, whatever you want through the link. Soap, detergent, Blink XT2. Any one of them would work to help us out, guys. And Rob, Va2A News, reporting on your rights. Thank you for watching.